All right, everyone, welcome. Third edition or third episode. Boom, bust,
We're
and
back. We're
yes.
back. Well, look, it's what we have. I was off. I had spring break with the kids and was skiing. And if you're off the desk for more than a couple of days, Trump kind of upends everything, doesn't he?
Can't take a weekend's break at the moment, and it's always on a Friday.
It's all done on Friday. Yeah, I look. These tariffs are crazy. 25% on auto, but like if you step away from auto and just look at what's happening, he's upending the copper markets. Uranium's a critical mineral now, or going to be, and he's really kind of just disrupting the whole ecosystem of minerals globally.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all ties together. I mean, okay, I want to get this right for everyone and for ourselves because there was the big executive order that he signed, basically the critical minerals executive order boosting domestic critical mineral production, and it was expediting permitting, industry input, mining act clarification. It was all based around, Cold War powers to ramp up mineral production in the US. I mean, well, actually, first of all, I mean, just to put this in context, America is 100% dependent on import reliant on 12 of the 50 critical minerals. And I mean, just basically a hell of a lot more, 90% on a load more. I mean, can this work?
I don't know. The thing about the states is, especially for those of the people who are watching or listening, there is this federal system, and then there's a state by state system. And so it's one thing for Trump to come out and say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And that's relevant to federal lands. But, I think it's a little bit more complicated if it's not on federal land. And so I think that, with the BLM and, certain aspects of government property or however they look at it across the states, I think he could be extremely effective. I wonder how effective he can be, in the case where it's a state's issue, it's a state permitting issue or a state regulatory issue. And so, I think, and it'll be interesting to see if we get there or not. And we'll probably have to have some sort of a crisis. But, for instance, there are copper mines in California, and, there's a lithium and a uranium prospect in Oregon, places you don't think of as mining jurisdictions. Would Trump be willing to lean on the state and say, hey, we're not going to fund this thing or that thing if you don't push forward with permitting? And so I think that's where it gets interesting, because on the federal lands, that's pretty straightforward, and I think he can be effective. But I don't know what the federal government, what levers they have to push forward projects where it's not a federal issue at all. It's related to like the states.
Is it emergency? I mean, we just listed about how import reliant America is, but also China's just starting to export restrictions on tungsten, gallium, germanium,
Well,
antimony.
look, we are entering a moment where, so people are calling minor metals are basically all critical minerals, but then critical minerals also like encompasses, I mean, it's almost everything. Like it's kind of this crazy thing. But if we step back for a second, let's talk about minor metals as a subset of critical minerals. And that's kind of the tungstens and the galliums. I mean, these things could just roof. You saw what happened to antimony. Tungsten went from like $6 to what's it at now, 44, since January, mind you. So I think you're going to see these critical minerals absolutely roof, and it's not going to happen together. So it kind of opens up some interesting moments for investors to make money. But one of the results should be from Trump's announcement is that US based assets get funded. And it may or may not help them through the permitting sense of if there's like states issues. But what I think it definitely does is it cashes them up for the fight. And I can think of examples. There's this little company, US Copper. It's in northeastern California, historically operating copper mine. It's big. It's not high grade by any stretch, but it's a big project. But it's in California, and I think the thing's trading at 6 cents. It's like this would somewhere else be a copper mine, and will they get cashed up for the fight? And I think there's 50 of these or 20 of these for nickel. There's some in kind of in the northern part of the U.S. for nickel, and so maybe that's the big benefit of what Trump does here is he lets these companies re-rate. 6 cents goes to $1 or 50 cents or whatever it goes to, these companies get cashed up, and then they're able to move through that process on the state side, which might be more protracted.
I mean, California is a great example, right? Because I mean, if you're in a red state, in theory, they'd be more happy to start funding some of these mines. But California is way over on the other end of the scale,
Well,
governance wise.
the left coast. Well, California is actually a unique case. So, on some states, it's like everything the permitting is done on a statewide basis. In California, actually, the counties, which for our listeners, you have the state as you have the United States, and then from the United States, you then have a state, and then within the state, you have counties, and counties make up the state. So it's kind of a subset of the state. So in California, as opposed to say, Nevada, that decision is being made largely on a county level. So if you take this example, and there are other examples, but the example of this copper project I was talking about, it's in a fairly red county, and so you would think that a project like that would move through the county and then up to the state level. Um, but if you were down in Los Angeles or something, it's hard to envision, like Governor Moonbeam there, right? Like it's hard to envision those things making it out. But it all comes back to the most important point, which is I think what Trump has really done is created an environment where a lot of projects are going to one re-rate, and then two on the back of that re-rating get funding for a development cycle, which the US hasn't seen in maybe 50 years, right? Like, I mean, this is a cycle that hasn't happened in decades. No one, I don't think anyone can really remember that last cycle.
And it's coming at a time when, I mean, I chatted about this before, but when the Treasury Secretary is talking about trying to take money out of tech and all these other places and pump them into,
But
things like
but
mining.
there's this like thing about everyone's memory, and NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Uh, a couple summers ago, I floated the middle fork of the Salmon River in Idaho. Do I really think a mine will get permitted? Like just the economic benefit to that area from the middle fork of the Salmon River probably far exceeds any mine being built where potentially there could be an accident in the middle fork. I was skiing in the Wasatch and the Uintas the past week, and I don't know what percentage of Utah's economy is related to snow sports, but I suspect it's very high, right? So there are going to be these challenges around. It's one thing for Trump once again to put this forward, but you know, does anyone really want to mine near Jackson Hole? Probably not. Does anyone want to mine, near Park City? I mean, yeah, Park City was a mine 100 years ago or something, or maybe more. Maybe it's too. I don't know how long ago it was, right? But so I think there are challenges and headwinds that will have to be worked out. Certainly, certain jurisdictions like a Wyoming overall, a Nevada, a New Mexico, those are probably you're gonna be pushing on an open door. But in some of these other states, like in Idaho, California, where there are deposits which are economic at the current prices and which could make sense, it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
And then we've got
And let's
price.
not forget let's not forget Alaska, right? I mean,
Well, yeah.
look at Crystal Bay. And like, and as much as I'm a mining guy, like some mines shouldn't be built, and I think that has to, doesn't matter where you sit on that spectrum of left, right, center. Uh, some of these mines, like if there's the potential to destroy one of the last great salmon sanctuaries effectively, um, that mine, in my view, probably shouldn't be built. So that it's not like this blanket thing we're going to build every mine. It's still probably on a case by case, jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis.
Judging from those fishing rods behind you, you're a little biased on that.
I'm catch and release though.
So, but then we've got price, right? So he's talking about pumping in investment, executive orders, Cold War era powers. But if they cannot bring the price down or the price up for these mines, well, either the price down for the mines or the price up for the minerals against China, who is often, for example, nickel swamping the market, bringing the price down, that's going to be difficult. And he's talking, he's signed another executive order with copper. We're waiting for the Commerce Department to come out with, are they going to
And
tariff
it's
that?
like the problem is the people in the U.S. government, like the ones I've talked to, they're not professionals, not commodity professionals. They might be actual professionals, but they're politicians, appointees, people who've been working in the government. And I rarely, if ever, met someone who was a Glencore trader who works at, and for the audience, Glencore is one of the big trading houses, but it just doesn't happen. And so I would say this in the immediate term, if the US government needed tungsten, antimony, whatever that mineral was, there's a price that will clear the market. So it's not like they're not going to get it at some price. And so, that stockpiling thing, which happened during the Cold War, like that's important in the immediate term. But if people inside the US government or if people in general have this view that we're now in this post World War II era where the world's going to realign around new superpowers and readjust itself, which kind of is what's happening with Trump and Europe and what have you. Then the US government actually has to look itself in the mirror and secure supply. And that's going to extend beyond the US. I'm sorry, they're going to have to make up with Canada. Like you're going to have like Canada, nickel in Canada, uranium in Canada, like some of these other rare earths in Canada, and potentially Africa. Like that, just the numbers don't work any other way.
And that kind of goes to the tension of the cars, the automakers, because the automakers, they, in America, right? Tesla, General Motors, they need to make cheap cars to compete, or you put up the tariffs. But even if you put up car tariffs, which is what Trump is doing, then the cars are still more expensive in America. You need to bring the battery price down. To do that, you need cheap minerals. And one of the ways, Biden was trying to do this, and you just mentioned it, you've got to make friends with Canada. You've got to make friends with other places who have the mines, can bring it on board pretty quickly and reasonably cheaply. Also nickel with Indonesia. I mean, GM is building, is investing quite heavily there. So when it comes to the crunch, is America going to say, okay, free trade agreement countries, you're all in? Or is Trump's, America first going to work? And it's going to be interesting to see how that tension plays out.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, NAFTA, if you take NAFTA, for instance, in a large part, NAFTA actually was almost intentionally pushing work into Mexico, for instance. And like there's some really nuanced laws, like what does made in America actually mean? So like there's these funny things like the whole thing gets built somewhere else, but if you assemble it in America, they send it in a box and assemble it as made in America. So I don't know. And also, does America really want to have an industrial base? It's all fine and well to talk about it, but is there really a labor force to support large scale production of automobiles, especially when automobiles are probably increasingly becoming more automated, with robotics and what have you. So um, I don't actually know. I think about it a lot. I don't, I do think we need to broaden our alliance. I mean, Canada as a 51st state is nonsense, but I think he might be serious about Greenland. I mean, there's what, a quarter of a million people in Greenland, and if he goes to Greenland and says, have a referendum, and by the way, everyone alive and born in Greenland never pays income tax. I mean, that's nothing, right? Like you would get that vote. So I I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see what shakes out.
And it's going to take time because these mines are going to take time to build. They're going to take a decade to
Right?
build.
And by the way, when people don't get it, like you build a mine, even once it's let's just forget the capital, forget all the nonsense, the noise, the permitting. It's actually not easy to build a mine. You got to get you got to get that processing right, and that ramp up of the mine in some cases can take years. So even if everything is perfect, here's your money, here's your permits, here's everything, let's go. Like you're not mining in large scale next year. Like that can take years to actually um, come to fruition.
And more than mining, it's the processing plants.
Yeah, and by the way, that's like a lot of it. Like look at antimony and gallium and germanium, and like what we're really talking about here is the refining processing. Where 96% is in China, and we've completely it's really that was a decision based on exporting pollution because refining is relatively not so expensive. I mean, you can toll it. There's things you can do, but that was a decision to export pollution to China, and it's dirty. It just is. And once again, you're gonna have to ask people in America somewhere to suck it up and take the pollution on. And I don't know. Like, we'll see.
There is a moment here, though, with technology to try and clean some of this up. So, yes, the last sort of 20 years, we've exported our, environmental problems. But DLE technology with lithium, for example, in theory, this is a much cheaper, faster, cleaner method. It's still
I don't think it's
untested.
worked. I'm not aware of it working at any large scale yet. Right? Like
But if
I
it
think there's a lot of
does,
people try. Yeah, if it does, that could change everything. But it's still a dirty. Mining is you don't you can make it less dirty. You can make it less of this and that. But you're literally digging a hole in the ground, cracking rocks together and pouring acid on it. I'm exaggerating, but like the nature of the thing is, you know, it's not spick and span. And by the way, that's just mining. Let's talk about refining for a minute, right? So
yeah. All right.
but the good news is, if you're an investor in commodities, this is a moment for you. This is the moment, right? So a lot of things are going to go, and it is actually kind of exciting time. So I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think our podcasts are getting the habit of starting incredibly positive, talking ourselves into a hole and climbing back out. It is
Oh
incredibly exciting. I mean, there's so much moving, and you've got Europe trying to, source their supply chains. You've got America, obviously, critical minerals, executive orders, China doing its thing. I mean, it's all over. Everything's to play for.
yeah,
So, Trump's executive order, critical minerals, boom, bust, or BS?
boom.
Yeah, boom. Let's go for it. Cheers, Anthony. This is a great one. And thanks everyone. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll catch up with you next time.
All right, talk soon.